So welcome back, everyone. Welcome back to Lessons Learned, another episode. My name is Obed Figueroa, and I am pleased again today to introduce to you another doctor that has walked the walk that you aspire to, and we have a lot that we can learn from her. So I look forward to our discussion. So let me begin with the introduction. Um, so Dr. Josiane Joseph is from Miami, Florida. Her parents migrated from Haiti. They sought new beginnings, which inspired Dr. Joseph's many pursuits, such as being an author, a scientist, a clinician, educator, entrepreneur, and being a community servant. Along the way, she earned a bachelor's degree in biology from the University of Florida. She then went on to earn a PhD in clinical and translational science, studying skeletal muscle regeneration, and an MD from the Mayo Clinic. While completing her doctorate degrees, she also directed a program called Pre-Med Insight, which exposes underrepresented students to opportunities in medicine. Dr. Joseph then began her residency training in general surgery and made the decision to pivot. She she became an author. The book title is A Year Intentional Living. A Year of Intentional Living. She then founded her company, Double Doc J LLC. She is a woman of strong faith and has experienced challenges and success. She enjoys traveling, reading, theater, social exercise, and maintaining relationships. It is those relationships are where she believes she has found success personally and professionally, which has shaped her values in life, which are joy, growth, and love. So welcome, Dr. Joseph. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It is such a pleasure.
Sure. It's so impactful for us to learn about you, particularly our young people that are just beginning their undergraduate studies, even older people for that matter as well. Anyone that has pivoted from the traditional trajectory of going to medicine, they sometimes don't have role models or people that they can share stories with or listen to the other stories. And so I really do appreciate you, all right, for sharing your experiences. Even if you're at a stage where you're still thinking, right, like you have, we continue to grow, like who when does that stop? So uncertainties are totally fine. um, what we do is we start with some speed questions so that we can get to know you a little more. So I'm going to ask you some things, and you can give me your first thoughts. Okay.
All right.
Alrighty. PC or Mac?
PC for sure.
All right. Android or iPhone?
Android.
Favorite season?
Favorite season is summer. It's forever summer in Florida.
Nice. Best vacation spot?
I feel like the best vacation spot is always somewhere you've never been before. So I can't give you
Okay,
that.
got that. Um, what's your favorite restaurant
That's
or
such a
type?
good question. I am Caribbean and I think they do it the best. So any Caribbean food kind of does it for me. And actually like well-seasoned food like Asian cultures, I love their food too. So.
Excellent. Do you have, if you think of food in this way, either whether it be a food or a dessert, that when you indulge, you feel guilty?
I don't feel guilty about eating. It's nourishment for your body, and I think I make really good choices. So, I enjoy eating
Okay,
when I
good,
do
good,
eat.
good, good. Um, Favorite movie?
It's got to be The Lion King. I think it's a classic, the original cartoon version. It just
Yeah.
has salient lessons. It's fun to watch, and I think it works for anyone in the family.
Nice, nice. Do you have a favorite TV show?
I'm not the type of person to watch TV, so
Hmm.
no, I don't. I don't like. There are some that I really enjoy, but I don't really watch them. Like I can go a year or two without thinking or watching them. So TV is not my thing. I'm
Yeah.
more of a movies person.
Okay. Do you watch sports or participate in
No,
sports?
I don't
No?
watch sports, but basketball would definitely be my favorite sport field. I played basketball for a couple of like maybe a year or so when I was in
Okay.
elementary school, and the pace, there's no sport like it to me. I mean, others people can say that about other sports, but basketball, you got to keep your eye on the ball and see what's going on. And yeah, they give a lot of fanfare and fun with that sport.
So I have one that's painful for me to sit and watch, and I can't. I guess mine's would be most painful to watch. I would say golf. I
Oh,
can't.
close second to me is baseball because if you're
Oh,
not near the hecklers,
that's
the
another one.
hecklers is what make baseball fun.
Yeah,
So
for me with baseball, I can't even sit. I walk around. I can't sit and watch it. I just get up and walk. I can't. Um, your favorite color?
black is my favorite color. I enjoy that color.
Okay. Do you have a favorite car?
A favorite car? I kind of feel guilty saying it because I don't drive it. I don't know that I like mini SUVs. I will say that. I drive a car
Oh,
in that class. It wasn't the car that I wanted, but it is in the same
all
class.
right. Now, when you think about your teachers, is there any teacher that stands out that you would say, "Oh, that was my favorite"? I guess you can give me, any level you want, or one or two.
Okay. Ooh, that's a great one. I think, and I've been giving this answer for 20 years. My fourth
Mm.
grade teacher, um, she just was amazing. She was so encouraging, just the way she moved. She was a genuinely wonderful person. She loved her students. She would stay after school. She always had encouraging words. She was nice to everyone in the class. And I go to school in Florida. I went to public school. The students are not very, they don't come from households that support them being, emotionally regulated. So she had a tough time, and just the way that she moved and encouraged me, and she put me in all sorts of programs. She applied for my first magnet school. She went to the school with my application for me. So she was someone who like was dedicated to my success, and that's kind of one
Well,
of
what's her
the.
name? What's her
Her
name?
name was Diana. Her should
Tell
I
me the
say her?
last. If you
Diana
want.
Escobar was her name when she was my teacher, and
Yeah.
she's a transformative woman. She really cares about students. She's my model of how you should approach your career because
Oh,
she did it to change the world. And I feel like her impact is going to be a lasting one.
oh my God. So let's begin. What I often like to start with is, do it chronologically so that we can kind of understand the walk that you've had to the point where you're at now. And if you were to think about, the early years for you, um, would you say at a high school level that you were thinking about medicine?
I would say absolutely. Yes. It was I'd have to start from kind of the beginning. I would say that when I started school, I'm someone I love knowledge. I love information. It just feels good to have and to
Yeah.
know what's next and to understand the process. So I've always been that type of person. And when I started school, I knew how to read, and it just felt like a dream come true that I was able to be in a place where you're supposed to learn. But when I got there, that dream was not the reality of what it turned out to be. I feel like, especially in Florida, where the model that they use to do funding for education and just the environment they curate here is not conducive to someone who's curious, who's inquisitive, who takes initiative to on their own learning. It's very, it's more of a structured wheelhouse sort of deal with Florida education. So I would say that when I started school, and 2 weeks after, I was like, I don't think I'm going to make it through this. I genuinely tried to drop out of school in kindergarten. So that's the
Oh,
background that I'm coming from. And then years later, my sister ended up getting hit by a car, and that was my first introduction to medicine. I
okay.
I've been to doctors like once or twice here and there, but we were there all the time. If you can imagine the amount of care that can take from a serious accident like that. We were there all the time. And then I really started to understand their role and how they were changing people's lives because that was a tough time for us. And they were right there with us. And so from there, we dealt with that for a couple years, and then I just got the impression, and I always say this is from God, the impression that I was going to be a doctor when I was 12. So this was shortly before high school. And
Mm,
honestly, I think that's probably the only way I would have been able to persevere through it, is to have that impression, to just have a knowing that this was going to happen. Because the way that I felt about school at that time, like the abuses I'd experienced as a student, there were teachers who they didn't respect the position of a leader, an authoritative figure, an instructor. They were verbally abusive to students. They were actually abusive to
mm.
students on some occasions, and it made the learning environment tougher. So,
And I have a, I'm sorry
go
to
ahead.
cut you. I shouldn't assume. So your parents came from Haiti. So were you born in Haiti or were you born in the
No,
U.S.?
I was born in South Florida. Yes.
Okay.
So, they had a
Yeah.
different.
Yeah,
Mhm.
the reason why I asked because I was wondering was there some kind of, transition issues, just
No,
adjusting
there
to.
was never.
Oh,
I say my primary languages are both English and Creole, because
okay.
my parents, and then I had siblings
Yes.
who spoke English, and I was fluent in both when I
Uh,
started school. So yeah, that's that background. It wouldn't have made it feasible for me to choose a career as a doctor. Like, because to choose a career where you're in school for 24 years, I would have never been able to do that on my own with the experiences that I'd had with education as a student, growing up I was in school for 12, 13 years in elementary. So I really had to have something greater leading me in that direction.
so
And
at
so
that,
that's,
yeah,
huh?
I was going to say, so at that stage, you were experiencing challenges with the context of that environment.
Mhm.
How did you make it through? Like, what was happening so that you would to make it through to your next stage?
It's just a day by day situation, like
Hmm.
you just keep hopeful and you keep going day by day. That's how I did it. That's how I approach life in general. Like, I know that the way things are, they can't continue to be. If it's not good, then it's not done. That's even when I was a kid, before I had the faith that I have today. I kind of just I knew that. I knew that there's no way that what I was dealing with at that time was sustainable, and so I would
Hmm.
just keep going until I could make a choice for something else.
Hmm. And so in your family, would you be the first to graduate from college in the US, I guess?
No, we in my generation are first generation, but I have a sister who she she is an engineer. She's a mechanical engineer. She was the first to graduate college. But
Gotcha.
her journey, she took 10 years it was a longer journey, because both of my parents, they have less than a middle school education. So
Okay.
it's not even like, she didn't have guidance or people who knew the path. We were just told to go to school, go to college. But how do you do that is always the question that you need a mentor, a knowledgeable mentor, not just any mentor to get you
Mhm.
to. So she had, ways to go, but she got it done, and everyone was proud of her and was able to go there. And I'm told that we were not the first in the family, but my mom had one of her brothers was actually on track to be a scientist in Haiti, but he died suddenly. So we don't even have that history to fall back on. So
Gotcha.
it's just the way that it turned out. We ended up being first generation.
Wow. Yeah, there's such a strength there. I'm telling you, it because you have to figure things out. I see it. I see it quite often, and it's undervalued. See, I'm accustomed to working with committees, screening committees, and I'm telling you, it's not given enough value. And people like me have to be the ones to point that out. Do you not recognize that strength of that individual who has to figure it out and keeps moving because there is nobody before them that walked that walk, right? So I commend you for that. I truly do, and your sister. Um, when you got to the point of, senior year of high school and applying to colleges, I'm going to assume your sister gave you some guidance, but was there anyone else?
Well, I went to school for advanced studies at Miami-Dade College. That school is only 11th and 12th grade, and it's only 50 people in that year. Like, your year would be, the 12th grade year is 50 people. On site, because it was 4 schools, like a couple schools in total with more, but the people
Hmm.
I was exposed to was 50. And
Hmm.
so we, for the most part, were all on track to go to college. So my sister didn't have to help me in that regard for applying because we had a counselor that was like, this is the strategy, apply this, and that. So just because she had gone to that school and I followed her path, that was enough to bring me on the trajectory to getting to college. So,
Gotcha.
yeah.
Oh, excellent, excellent. Okay. School with a purpose, and it it fulfilled it. It fulfilled it for many people. That's awesome. And the name of that school again, please?
School for Advanced Studies.
Excellent. All right. So you apply to colleges. Did you apply to more than one?
Of course. Of course. That's the strategy. Yes. So primarily to colleges in Florida, but I did do a few that were from out of state. Yes. I applied to colleges all over.
Okay. All right. So the University of Florida.
Mhm.
Um, when you got accepted, what does your first year look like to you? Like, how was it?
Any first year, I would say this throughout my life, any first year of anything is a transition. And it doesn't have to be a difficult one, but it's one that requires a huge learning curve and work to adjust. Because imagine, you're 18. I was really the first one to go away and stay away. Because remember, my sister, she went to college, but she wasn't able to complete even a semester. She had to come back home. And it was just a whole like issue with financing and things like that. So
Hmm.
I went and I stayed, and no one had ever done that successfully before. So it was a lot of figuring out. And in the beginning, I like to tell this story.
Hmm.
My first college exam, I failed it. I failed it by like one or two, like one question. I was one question away from passing that exam. And I was doing all the things. I did all the homework. I was in every class, and it showed that I was doing well, but when I got to the exam, it just wasn't the case because it's
Hmm.
different taking an exam and doing homework because you have unlimited time with with homework and you don't take an exam.
Hmm.
And so that was a major turning point for me because at that point it felt like college was the option. I didn't have a plan B. I had been in South Florida for so long and I'd applied for so many jobs and I knew that the job market it wasn't healthy enough for me to go back and be able to pick up and just do something else. So college was the plan and I
Hmm.
couldn't afford to fail it. So at that point, it just changed my life. Like the way that I was studying, it was very regimented. I spent a lot of time studying, a lot of time in tutoring. And at the end of that course, not only did I get an A in the course, but I ended up teaching. I led a small group for that course the next semester.
Mm.
And it became one of my crowning achievements because something that I was desperately trying to move past. In the end, it worked out to be testament of what I'm capable of. So it was people always say you got to fail a lot to succeed. That's one of the features of someone who's successful is they fail a lot. And I know that to be true because had I not had that experience, my mindset would have been totally different. I had colleagues that started off with me in college who were on track to be in medicine, and I was the only one left at the end. I was the only one left, and I was the one who had like failed and had that sort of mindset of no, this is the option, and I got it to the end.
So if I may hold you there for a moment, so that in that first year, can you share some of the things that you were trying to figure out, and then what were the tools that you used that helped you figure it out, help sustain you there?
So one of the main tools just in life that I feel like are helpful, and it's one that I actually struggled with, is um, the people around you often have the answers you're seeking. And as someone who's introverted, I was raised to like I come from a big family and our family was it, like my dad didn't allow us to, go to sleepovers and things like that. So we were raised to be it's you and it's us, and then you do your best and we'll be here. Like that was sort of it. Avoid everyone else. And
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
when
Tradition.
when you go into adult life and that philosophy, it actually doesn't turn out to be that way. It's you and it's the people around you. Your family, they were 5 hours away. They didn't have the level of education that I was now seeking. They just didn't have the tools to be able to help me navigate. Because at that time, when I started college, my sister didn't have a bachelor's degree. She was still figuring it out herself. So there was no clear beacon of which direction I should go. So when I realized that what I was doing wasn't working, I started talking to the people around me because that was just the only that was the only way to figure it out. There was no other way to do it. And the thread that I noticed was everyone was paying for a specific type of tutoring, and those were the people who had an upper hand. And then I
Mm.
started learning about the free tutoring resources we had, and I would take advantage of those. And then, they're just having study groups, all of those little things that came together and made me successful in the end. They literally would just have the answer to what would make you successful. And it worked. It worked every time.
If I may ask you, did you have to go through a process of humbling yourself to accept the tutoring, to go in that direction, or you just kind of knew you need to do it? Was there a stage for you there?
To accept the truth. I mean, once you fail something, you've been humbled. I
Okay,
think
okay,
that is the
okay,
process of knowing.
okay,
And then you need to dig yourself out of that hole. So whatever I needed. The problem at that time was not accepting the tutoring because I wanted the tutoring prior to taking that exam. It's just that the tutoring costs. It had a cost associated, and I come from a financially disadvantaged background. So even if I just don't get the opportunity to accept luxuries. It has to be absolutely required. Because even if I didn't have a stipend for my books, there's a possibility I wouldn't have even purchased books for the courses. Like those are the kind of decisions that someone who doesn't come from a privileged background has to make. But fortunately, the scholarship that I had covered all those things. And even then, I still was looking for shortcuts for that. So to be able to make that mental leap toward, oh, let me just go and like buy this tutoring for every month for, like this fee. It was an astronomical fee, and I couldn't wrap my head around paying for that. But at the end of the day, if the people who are successful are doing that, then what other option is there?
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned the school had free resources. What did
They
that
had
look like?
free tutoring that you could go, and they would help you with problems that you brought. So they weren't reviewing concepts, but if you needed help while you were working through the problems you were working through, they were there to help you through that. So that was it. It turned out that I went to most any hour that I was free, I would go. I would just go and sit around people who were working so I can glean off of their knowledge too, even if I wasn't like directly answering questions, because practice the right kind of practice, then that's what I was missing, the right kind of practice. I was doing work, but I wasn't doing the right kind of work, is what gets you to that finish
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. All right. So moving past the first year, you got more tools. This enabled you to be better and, stronger for your sophomore year, stronger for your junior year. Was there anything more, any more lessons picked up in your sophomore and junior year?
line. Oh, there are lessons
Yeah.
all throughout it.
Life
I
balance.
really enjoyed college because one of my core values is growth, and that was one of the most transformative and growth experiences of my life. Just having to figure things out, like truly in an environment where it felt like you were independent and just you needed to use the resources you had to get the job done. That pushed me so far. Just going along the same line of how introverted I was, like it was very difficult for me to like say hi to strangers, like to open small talk with people who I just did not know. So
Mhm.
there was one point where I was like, that's not going to serve me. I've seen how the people around me supported my success, so I need to strategize for that. So I was a tutor for chemistry. That was the course that I had failed the first course. I was a tutor for it following semesters. And the way that it worked is you had to sign in when you would come to serve the hours that you had scheduled. And there was a woman in the office there who, I don't know what her role was, but she sat at the office and she probably was some sort of administrative assistant. I was like, okay, the task that you have is to go in there and tell her hi, like every day do that. And so that
Wow.
small goal, it was extremely challenging for me. Like I would stand at the door for a minute just saying, just do it, just do it, just do it. Like just say it, then
Mm,
you can leave, like just say it
yeah,
and you
yeah,
can leave.
yeah.
And she was such a nice woman. She was such a nice woman. And the funniest thing is that I started that first year, I was looking for a job all throughout. never was able to successfully get a job. That second year, I was looking for a job, and then I had that tutoring position that was unpaid, and I was unsuccessful. And then I finally got a job, but that lady that I was saying hi to every day, one day I just said hi to her. It was like 10 days in, and she was like, "Hey, are you looking for a job?" And I just was like, it's just that easy. It's that
Wow.
easy to get what you want. Like
Yeah.
if you take it, well, not take advantage, but you appreciate those around you, it always works out in your favor because people
Mm,
want to be in community with people who just acknowledge them and who are striving.
mm. Wow. That was nice. Okay. So you moved forward. I'm curious. So never any second thoughts about your direction when you got to, junior year, senior year.
Oh, there
Okay.
were always second thoughts. That's why I had to give that prelude to the fact that it really had to be something greater to call to that calling. Because I would say that I tried to leave the field of medicine at least 3 times before I was at the door of medical school. I was looking for another route. I went to the School of Advanced Studies, and that was a dual enrollment program. So I ended up getting that degree in business administration, but the track I was on was biology. I was supposed to get that degree in biology because that's the degree that goes to medical school.
Okay.
But I
Uh-huh.
decided to pursue biology because I mean, business because it sparked my interest. And I liked a lot of the times people are drawn to people they can relate to. And the business people were drawing me in. So like towards the end, that really was appealing. And so I ended up switching that. But during that time, but prior to that, most of the coursework I'd done was in psychology. So
Hmm.
those sort of concepts of understanding people and why they do things, and mental health. Mental health is something that's, like people in my family we've had to deal with. So that when you have like a personal connection to something, it draws you in. So those
Hmm.
were two fields that I considered very strongly. And at the end of the day, it just worked out to that same, like, I always came back to the original plan, even though I had all these sort of pivots that I was interested in.
Hmm. Okay, got you. And for reasons you're saying, just attached to that space or that area. Um,
But also
hmm.
because of the schooling, I had no concept of, I knew it would be a long journey, but it was even longer than I could have even conceived of when I started. Like I
Hmm.
ended up doing 14 years of college for someone who tried to drop out in kindergarten. That's unbelievable. you know, so I couldn't have wanted a path like that, and I definitely tried to deviate from it.
All right. All right. All right. So now we're going to move forward to the point in which you are getting ready to graduate from the University of Florida. Uh, Applying to medical schools. I mean, you were doing that before graduation. So prior to that, did you apply to more than one?
Of course, I find. Well, at the time, things changed. I think it's still a thing. They had the fee assistance program, so that program covered you for 15 schools.
Mm,
And so 15 schools was the number I applied to because that's kind of the mindset that I had as someone from my background again. And so I applied to 15 schools. I believe I interviewed, yeah, yeah. So I applied to 15. I did, I think seven interviews.
hmm.
And then I ran out of money. So I just,
I
I
am
stopped.
curious. I'm curious if you applied to just allopathic schools or both. Did you do also osteopathic?
No, I only did MDs.
Okay.
I think I did the number of 10 MD PhDs and four or five-ish MD onlys. And the MD onlys, I think I primarily did in Florida. Um, and then I did the interviews.
So I am curious with your interest of doing the dual program. You know, where did that stem from? Where did that come from that you wanted the PhD as well?
Sure. So one of the things that I think also supported my success as an applicant was we had phenomenal pre-health advisors at the university. And I, especially, with the start that I had, I purposed myself to visit them quarterly. So it was twice a semester. I would go in the beginning. I would go like before the end because everybody shows up at the end in order to sign up for classes. So
Mm-hmm.
that but I was already set because I had a strategy that I would know what the plan was before standing in a line for 2 hours. And so that's what I would do. I would go and I would talk to them, and right from that very first semester, they were like, "This is what you need. You need research, clinical, non-clinical leadership. All these things to prove that you're going to, or you're just capable of thriving in that sort of environment." So that's what I would look for. I would look for research opportunities. I would look for clinical opportunities, and I would go down that path. And then I found a lab, the lab that I worked in, and I was studying sex allocation and simultaneous hermaphrodite fish with Dr. Hart at University of Florida in the Collette St. Mary lab. And she was just amazing. She was very encouraging. She saw the skills that I had, and she just encouraged me to just consider that. And I would always tell her, no, we've already got a deal. Like, and the deal that I had was already, like I said, it was far beyond what I could imagine in terms of education. So like, why on earth would I add to it? Like it doesn't make any sense for the person that I am. And I just need to get in, get out, start working and living a life. But she never gave up. She wasn't discouraged by me saying, no, we've already talked about the plan. And she would say, actually, have you thought about this? And, as she would plant those seeds, when I did think about it, I was like, well, wait a second, because I was having a lot of fun with her and the work I was doing. I was going to conferences, I was communicating the science. Like it was things I like to do. I like to write, I like to read, I like to communicate with people in conference. It turns out that I really do enjoy networking and communicating with others, and I would get to do that. And I was winning prizes, and it was just
Wow.
it was a great experience. So I was like, well, if I can do it, why wouldn't I do that? Like, why wouldn't I choose a career that aligns with the things that I'm good at and the things that I like to do? So, like, right at the end is when I decided, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go for that. And so that's what I did. I ended up doing.
You know what I'm curious, and I can relate to it as well. I wonder for you, um, as you're moving forward with your education and interest in medicine, and your family members, they have their own interests and pursuits. But did you begin to feel somewhat disconnected? And how was that connection with your family? I'm sure from love, it's always there's a connection, right? But in
Mhm.
terms of adult pursuits, did you tell me how that was for you? Has been for you?
Well, it's it's just the case that I live in a world that they can't conceive of. Like even I sometimes I'm like, how am I living this life? Like
Yeah.
look at what I get to do. Like,
Mm-hmm.
but so when I think about how they approach me, that's what I'm thinking about. Like they want to be supportive and they want to see me succeed,
Mm-hmm.
but the lens that they're coming at it's not my reality. Everyone has their own reality, and at the end of the day, I'm the one who has to live through the reality I built for myself.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that I never it from their perspective, I never deviated from the path of being physician. They would tell you that they feel that they always knew that that's what I was going to do is to be a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I would tell you like I knew that that's not what I wanted. I wanted to not. I didn't want to be in school for 25 years. That's what I ended up doing. Like I
Mm-hmm.
know I'm good at it, and I knew that it was a way that I could serve my community, and it was just such a strong impression on my heart that I was like, I will do this because I do love my patients, and I believe that they should get high quality care, and I believe that for some that I would be the best person to give that to them, and that's
Mm-hmm.
why that was my driving motivation for keeping going. But there were times where I was like, I would approach them and try to this is where the difficulty would have come in. Like I would try to articulate. There was one time in particular in the beginning of medical school where I called someone in my family to let them know that I was struggling, and not with the work of the medical school, but just
Mm-hmm.
myself. I just was physically exhausted, and I didn't know how to fix that. That's a struggle in itself. So I called her and I just was like, I don't think I'm doing well. And I could just hear the fear in her voice. Because it felt like when you bring something like that to them, it's like all of their hopes and dreams are being
Right.
crushed. That's how
Yeah.
it sounded.
Mm-hmm.
And that actually made it very difficult for me moving forward, to feel like I can go to them with that sort of issue and get supported.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
then I I kept that into consideration. I had to go to others to deal with whatever I was dealing with,
Right.
just because they didn't have the lens and they had hopes for me and they had an understanding of what I would do that I was consistently doing that, that it would have been hard for them to give that up. And in the
Yeah.
end, it was very hard. It's still very hard for them to like give up that image of me in that very rigid path that I'd been on for 14 years.
Yeah, no, I'm sure the love is there. That's not without question. The love is there. But yeah, the reason why I ask is sometimes as professionals, the higher we go, if you will, sometimes, and particularly if there's the environments, it becomes less and less minorities in that space. And when, you become, the only one sometimes, there's issues we go through, and battlements and so forth. And sometimes isolation, feelings of isolation, just because our familiar is no longer so familiar in a different
Yeah.
context.
And there was that too. There was that too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but they might understand because they're a lot of them. I have sisters that are nurses, and I have the one who's an engineer, and so they have a feel for the environment, but they don't know because to be a nurse and to be a doctor is very different. Like it's common
Hmm.
for nowadays for folks like us to be nurses and to advance and to have positions like that, but to be a doctor, it's very different. It's very
Hmm.
different. And then when you come into a space, especially in surgery, and surgery is they're very stuck in the historical patterns of training.
Hmm.
And so it's a different feel and it's a different experience to be in that it's hard to it's you can't even articulate it because when you do, it's one of those intangible things where people can brush it off and what proof do you have that that's your experience?
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I've always loved SNMA, and there may be other spaces that kind of do similar to what they do, but just to be around, like-minded, whether it be career focused or not, it just there are some things that others can't relate to, when we're in professional spaces, and when you're surrounded by people that look like you, they get it. There's no big dialogue that even needs to happen. Sometimes it's just like, mm-hmm. you know.
And I would say that honestly, that probably was pivotal to my getting the PhD because one of the first conferences I went to was the McNair Scholars Regional Conference, and that's tailored towards financially disadvantaged folks, minority individuals. And so when I went there, I thought that's how science looked. I went there and everyone, like they talk like me, look like me. How else? Why would I know any different?
Mm,
So that's how it, and it wasn't like that. It didn't turn out to be like that.
awesome, awesome. Yeah, just glad you had supports. Um, okay, so you graduate, you accept the offer for the Mayo Clinic.
Mhm.
Um, how was that first year?
It was a transition. It was a major transition, and coming back to the struggle, the academics were a major adjustment. People do say that medical school is like drinking through a fire hose, and it is. But the thing is, I had been there before because the way that I had moved to that first year of college, that's exactly what was required of me when I went to
Okay.
medical school. So it wasn't. I didn't have any discomfort when it came to the work that I needed to do for
Mm-hmm.
medical school. But the schedule that I had to hold for medical school was the thing that was raising alarm bells for me because the level of exhaustion that I experienced that first year, I couldn't even describe. I couldn't describe because we had unique to some medical schools, we were required to be in class when class was in session. So we were in class from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Like they would cut into our lunch breaks. It was 4 hours back up, like it was a lot. It was a lot of being somewhere at a certain time. And when I started, for college, the first time I would eat a meal would be at noon. Like that's when I would first eat and drink is lunch,
Mm,
and it was a
yeah, yeah, yeah.
sustainable practice for me. But to go into class at 8 a.m. and, I didn't eat breakfast, I didn't have any water, and then 12:30 was the first time I ate and drink anything. Like that was not a healthy approach to being successful. And then I had always been iron deficient. Like for most of my life, I had been very low hemoglobin, and it didn't bother me. Like a couple times a year, I'd feel really faint, and that was it. I would move on. Like I was able to sleep when I wanted in college, and I was able to get my job done. But when you have to be somewhere 8 to 5, and you have to have your brain on because you need that information, it just was. It was. There was one day I was walking, and I was like, I just felt like if I took another step, I would die. Like the thought in my head was that the energy it would take me to take that second step would kill me because I was so exhausted. And I took the second step, and I survived, and I was like, wow. Okay, like maybe those thoughts are. And then it took me a very long time to sort that out. Like, and I kept bringing it to the director. I was like, school's fine. Like, this is fine. But I just feel like I can't get enough sleep. I said I could sleep for 10 hours. I said I literally slept for 24 hours. And when I wake up, I'm still exhausted. Like I would skip lunch to go to sleep. I would go home and take a nap during lunchtime instead of eating because I just was so tired all the time.
Wow.
And she just would ask me about it. And I said, I know I'm iron deficient, but I feel like she was the miraculous thing was she studied iron. She studied iron and its effect on your brain. And she was saying, no, you're not okay. You can't just like have that deficiency and be at your peak. You need to sort that out. And I just was like, when you've dealt with something for your whole life, you think it's normal. You think it's normal, but it really
Yeah,
wasn't.
I get you.
She set me up at some point past the year with a hematologist, and we kind of went through some of my records, and she gave me a strategy that literally 2 weeks after I was taking the iron supplementation with the vitamin C, it just felt like I had woken up one day and I just had a new mind. it was it was
Nice.
a
Nice.
totally different thing, and yeah, I was way less irritable.
Nice.
It was like I was a new person. So things like that, where no one I know would. Even myself, they're still iron deficient now. I could tell them about it, but until like you'd have to like be in a position where no, like literally this thing is going to change your life for you to like commit to it. And so that was one of my main struggles.
Sometimes when people are in these spaces, and I've been there as well, like, you know, you have other thoughts, right? So, and most often we don't think about what's going on biologically. We start to think, oh, maybe it's just because I'm depressed. Maybe it's because I'm this, or maybe it's because I'm just not smart enough, or not good enough, or not. You got something
No,
physiological going on.
it was the iron deficiency. I like my mood was noticeable. There was one time I had a classmate who like was breathing, and I couldn't even concentrate on the lecture because his breathing was making me furious. Like I just like
Mhm.
I need to figure out a way to tell this guy that he's disrupting the class for me. Like stop breathing. And as I was sitting there, I was like, I don't know if that's reasonable. And
Yeah.
I missed the whole lecture. I missed the whole lecture because I was so mad at him.
Oh my God. That's funny. Oh boy. And he probably never got his issues fixed. Probably not. Wow. Okay. Um, but with your first year, I mean, the first 2 years are extremely difficult most often. What was your favorite subject in the first 2 years, or favorite class? Yeah.
The nice thing about the trajectory I took and knowing so early on and being on the path that I was on so early on was that I had experience with, like, I had college level anatomy classes when I was at elementary grade school. And so
Hmm.
that I, before I really thought about the journey, that's what I would have said brought me to medicine. I loved anatomy and physiology. You could tell me something, and 3 years later, I'll still remember those were the most salient, like educational experiences I've had was anatomy and physiology when I was a kid. And
Mm,
so we started off kind of like midway through the first semester taking anatomy and physiology. So I really enjoyed that. But I also enjoy like uh, physiology heavy subjects like endocrinology. And so that's kind of how I got to the path of endocrine surgery.
okay. Hmm. And I guess this, what was the subject, would you say, in the first 2 years that where you really felt challenged? Was there any particular subject?
The subjects that are, they seem the furthest away from patients are often the most challenging. Well, they were the most challenging for me.
Uh,
Biochemistry.
like
When I was in college, it was just, it feels like you're just, there are words and terminology that people always say you're never going to use them. But the crazy thing is, like, I remember thinking about like the TCA cycle one time and saying, I'll probably never use this. And this is the one time in my life I've ever said that. I never like to say that just because I'm obsessed with information. I just love information. So I don't have the mindset of this is not going to be useful to me because I just want it. It's useful to me just to have it, you know? But that
Mhm.
one time I thought that thought. And that ended up being one of the major themes of my thesis for my PhD, and was that biochemistry like space that I was in. And I
Gotcha.
did do work in skeletal muscle regeneration. And one of the models I used was a disruption in the TCA cycle. So I had to be very familiar with that biochemistry principle. And after that, I'll probably never say that again.
Thanks for prompting me to ask about the PhD, because I am curious on how are you managing, how is it structured for you, their program where you're doing the PhD and the MD? Like, when are you taking these different classes? Like, tell me what that looks like.
Yeah, so some programs they're going under restructuring, but for ours at the time that I started in the class of six that I was in, it was planned out so that you did 2 years, the first 2 years of medical school, which are the book learning
Yep.
years.
Hmm.
And you do 4 years of a PhD, which they try to make it as standard-ish of a PhD as possible, but it's more truncated because PhDs can be like 4 to 5 years, and they have longer periods where they rotate through labs to help them decide which lab is appropriate for them than we did. So we had to finish. It was very strongly encouraged for us to finish in that 4 years. And then you finish off the last 2 years of medical school. So medical school is a 4 year program. And so those last two clinical years where you get your clinical experience and apply to residency, we would do it at the end.
Two plus four, and then a two clinical. You're saying,
Yeah.
wow, wow, you spent a lot of, yeah, that's a lot of years. Hmm.
Yes, that was nearly a decade in a totally different state.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. All right. So you're successful, getting through that. Um, Did you require at the latter stage of medical school? I'm curious when you went through your clinical years, what was most exciting to you during your clinical years?
I would say that most of the time that I went in, because we got time to talk to patients beforehand before we would present to our supervisors. And
Mm,
that was the most exciting thing to me because I would laugh with people. Like, I always thought that cancer patients I would have a tougher time just because the emotional load they come with. Cancer is such a terrible disease. And it's like some people are looking at the face of death and that's all they're doing. They're sitting in their beds sick and dying.
mm,
And I thought it would be just a lot more emotional work to work with them. But I would sit and I would laugh with them, and they would have less than a year to live, and we would be laughing and joking and things like that. And I was just so moved that we could share that experience and to know that I got to be a part of their journey. I just love laughing with the patients, being with them, and seeing how I can support them on their journey. That was the best part for me, being in the clinic.
mm. Were you able to do your clinicals all in one state, or you spread out?
All in one
State.
state is what you asked.
Yeah.
Well, I was encouraged to do that. I was able, actually, the nice thing about Mayo Clinic is that they have three institutions and they allow you to go to all three.
Okay.
And they have local, like wherever their main institution is in those three states, they have other little sites around them.
Okay.
I chose to do more of like a rural family medicine area in Wisconsin, which was right next door to Minnesota, so I would drive. And then I also chose, even though I was told I didn't have to go to um, Pennsylvania,
Okay.
for a 4-week surgical rotation, just because the way that Mayo Clinic does medicine is I I was told that it's kind of different from other institutions. So I just wanted to see. So I wanted to see if I would be able to leave the place that I was trained and do well in somewhere else. And so I went to go take a look, and it felt the ways that it was different was okay with me. So it gave me more of a reassurance that yes, I can choose whatever I need to. I would do fine.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Insightful. All right. So let's keep moving forward. Um, so now, I mean, you're completing medical school. You're applying for residency. And again, I have to ask, you applied more than one?
Yes, yes. Oh boy. And at that time, listen, you skipped over the whole part about COVID and the pandemic and all
Oh,
of that. Being in Minnesota when George Floyd was murdered in Minneapolis, all of that was part of my medical school journey.
wow.
We skipped over that,
Wow.
but we can go right into applying. So I
Okay.
applied to, I would say like not like 65% of the schools I was recommended to apply to, just because I was like sure of the places that I could be in. Like
Mhm.
I applied to institutions that I knew that I would thrive in. And then it went fine, and I did the interviews and it went fine. And I got into one of the places I ranked pretty highly. So it was an okay journey.
Excellent. Excellent. And then you started, and how did that look?
Oh, a start? Like I said, it always has a look. It always has a look. And I I would say like rose-colored lenses about the University of Florida just because I had been there. That was like my place. That was, like that was my remember I said that it was
Hmm.
so I just decided in January, which was when I was supposed to notify them of whether or not I would come back, that I could not, like, even if I wanted to continue in general surgery, I would need to reapply and go to a different institution. I couldn't go where the values were so misaligned and continue to provide care there and get training there.
Yeah, understood. That was going to be my next. I'm so glad you mentioned that because I was like, I don't want medicine to totally lose you, just because of this one place. So you went through clinicals, you saw other environments, and so I'm sure you are aware of other places that are more aligned with your values. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
All right.
So yeah, it still was. I mean, I know I've lived and breathed it for years, over a decade, like it's
Yeah.
what I've done. And so it requires a breaking in order to give it up. But right now I don't, that's where I'm at. I've taken a
Oh,
break.
I do have a thought. I do have a thought. And this is really educational question for viewers. So how does one kind of assess? I would think clinicals do this. Assess, the right fit for residency. I would imagine clinicals are supposed to do that. But like, what
Mhm,
advice you would give to really kind of for someone to say, "That's not me. I think this is me." Like, what would you
mhm.
say?
I would say the more experience you have, the easier it is. Um,
Hmm.
and a bad experience doesn't necessarily tear the story, because the bad experiences can actually be the people, and it was the people there. Because I mean, I know half the surgeons at the institution I trained with, and we had a lovely time. We had great relationships. We had nothing in common, and we did fine together. Like it wasn't um it wasn't the field of surgery that did this to me. Like it was certain people that decided to behave however they behaved. And they were it has to do with understanding yourself. I think in life that's the major thing. And honestly, that's why I wrote my book, is the year of potential living. That's what I think I have a strength in, is that I do a lot to understand myself and to be present in my life and to recognize those things that build me and those things that wear me out. And it's because I'm so reflective. And I do things that build that environment where I have clarity, I can have peace with my decisions. And I, like I know, like the days go fast when I'm in the OR and my hands are at work. And, like I knew that. I knew that I would have a hard time just being swamped with paperwork and seeing dozens of patients during rounds. And I found people that I could vibe with, and that like their approach to medicine, I resonated. And so people will say that often, like when you find your people, that kind of helps you. But again, when you're coming from minority backgrounds, where are your people? Like that's why I give
Mhm.
that with a grain of salt. Is
Gotcha.
that it's more about the processes than it is about the people. Like if you understood that this is how I envision my life, and this is the process that would allow it, and then you look for your people in that, not letting the people define it for you, is more important.
Understood. Thank you. That's quite a bit. I do, before we end, and thank you for your time and sharing so much. I do want to know about your business. I do want to know about your book. So can you share about that?
Oh,
What inspired you?
sure.
Yeah, what inspired you to write
I
the book?
well, the journey. I mean, it's just been the journey. And again, this was another impression I would say from God. I feel like I've lived a very blessed life, no matter what. Like even in the experiences that I found negative, there was just such a beauty in it to know that, like I get to do that. Like I get to see it in that way just because of the background I had. Because I'm sure there are others out there who would have internalized all of that and felt like they were the problem. But there were clearly problems and unacceptable behaviors that I had learned that I learned better. I learned to respect myself. I learned to love myself, and I learned to seek out good things and good environments. And that's how I learned that. I put it in this book that I have here, A Year of
Nice.
Intentional Living. That's kind of the premise behind it. Just over the 20 years, all the strategies that I accumulated that supported my success, supported just my mental stability, that allowed me to really think and to know when it was important to know this is wrong and this is right. And to have that like spiritual discernment to know, like, no, this, even if I contributed it to it, this is not normal. This is not a normal response to how this should go. And, it almost feels like I knew already the answer when the problem came. I knew, I would say even 2 months before, 2 months into residency, I knew that the environment I was in, I started getting the suspicion that I would not accomplish very much. I literally had the thought 2 months in that
Wow.
what I would have liked to accomplish there, I was not going to do it just because of the way they communicated. And like, there were multiple times when I would try to ask questions and they would just tell me, we don't have time for you to ask questions. And I'm like,
Mhm.
I, I've never encountered that in my life, like I've been in
Yeah.
training for over 9 years, 8 years. I get to ask questions whenever.
Mm-mm-mm.
So is this just a new training book you all come up with?
Yeah.
But, like, I, people might have just said, actually, no, like that's normal. This is the cards I've dealt, I need to deal with that. But I was able to take a step back and say, no, I need more time to consider and reflect. And I was given the idea to write this book, to put how I was able to do that in there. And then that kind of came along with the business idea because I have a very broad skill set and I'm known. I mean, I've been called on to help people for years. That's what I did for my entire medical school training. I was on all these teams, I was on all these advisory boards, and it's not because of me. You can't get those positions because on your own. You have to
Right.
have people that say, this is the right person for that role, which is what happened. I was chosen for those roles. And
Mm.
it's because I have a track record for supporting people. So I wanted a business that gave me the infrastructure for doing that.
How long did it take you to write the book?
It took me, I would say, a good 6 months to
Okay.
like get it from start to finish. Yes, yeah,
Awesome. Awesome.
because
Um,
yeah,
Good.
it's more of a guide, so it's
Mhm. Mhm.
meant to be interactive. Got a lot of
And
writing.
and so how what you started your business before the book or after? Like how did
Well, officially the business got started after, but the ideas for it had existed. So, I think once you start thinking about starting the business, that's when the business started. But honestly, it's when the paperwork got in, so the business got started. But they kind of came along at the same time.
Hmm. And what are you able to do with the business? Like what ventures have you gone on with the business?
Sure. Yes. I've been able to put on a couple of workshops in support of professionals applying for medical school. I do a lot of editing, personal statements, things of that nature. I've had to do a lot of networking in order to build the brand up for the community, let them know I'm here. And we're in the early stages because, I've just had this year to work on it, but I'm just
Mhm.
enjoying the whole process. It's a lot of training because I did get the associates in business administration, but you got to refresh your skill set, especially in the field of business. And so I've been doing programs in order to help me to do that, getting certificates, and then just making sure that folks are aware that I'm here for them.
Yeah, a lot of networking.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, is there, again, thank you so much. I apologize if we went over time. So I appreciate you. Is there any last things that you might want to say to pre-meds, health science majors before we end?
I would say that the one thing about me throughout this entire journey is that I like truly enjoyed it. I enjoyed myself that surgery year. The people that I was able to meet, especially outside of the program, they've been such joy to me. Like even now, I still talk to some of them. They're checking on me. They're waiting for me to come back in town. Like it's it's such a gift to have had to be in those spaces and to get to know those people in medical school. Like you see, I was a part of various communities, and even if it wasn't perfect, like just the beauty of being a part of that and to serve amongst people. It's just been such a gift. I've been to numerous states doing presentations and recruiting for the institution. My goodness, the things I've seen. That's why I can't give you like a good vacation spot because things start running together after a certain while. But live
Mm,
your life. Like make sure that if you are on a journey, no matter what journey, the beauty is in the living. It's in the building community. It's in the shared experiences. It's in the supporting each other. That's what life is all about. And there's never a destination. We can talk about being where we want to be. The point of life is that you're never where you want to be. As long as you're living, there's more to do. There's more to grow, and there's more people and places to experience and to be present for. So
mm.
that's kind of what I've been loving about where I'm at right now.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. All right. So, Dr. Joseph, we again appreciate your time. And this will end with this episode, Lessons Learned. And we appreciate all the wisdoms you've shared. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you so much for having me.
All right.